In an era marked by increasingly complex global challenges, the urgency for a unified response to geopolitical tensions has never been more apparent. Ongoing conflicts, such as those in Palestine, Ukraine, Yemen, and the South China Sea, require a concerted effort from the international community. Balancing the need to address aggressive actions while minimizing the impact on civilian populations is crucial. Additionally, the current instability of global energy markets and economic conditions underscores the need for coordinated efforts to manage these interconnected issues effectively. Equally important is recognizing how geopolitical conflicts ripple through global stability and economic prosperity. The interconnected nature of today's world means that tensions in one region can profoundly affect economic conditions, trade dynamics, and social stability elsewhere. Addressing the broader implications, such as the effects on energy markets, supply chains, and international trade, is essential as well. Thus, this session aims to promote dialogue and collaboration for diplomatic and sustainable solutions to foster global political stability and economic prosperity.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you here today. We have a distinguished panel with very distinguished speakers. And basically the theme is geopolitics and its impact on economies. Geopolitics have been quite disruptive over the last few years in an unprecedented fashion. Is it a post-World War II new order? Is there going to be more polarization? Is there any predictability? The disruption has been impacting economies of countries like Egypt. Not even so, even other developed countries are impacted one way or the other. We are seeing the debacle in Ukraine and its implications on world economies, supply chain, oil prices, more so Gaza as we speak today and its impact on Suez Canal, on the region, and the potential flare-up of a war between Israel and Iran and its implications on not only on the region, on the whole world. We're seeing a revisit of globalization. Is it going to be a new trend into regional globalization? Are there going to be more polarization? The world economic powers, do they have a responsibility to work in tandem, or each one is going to pursue a different direction? Impact on economies is quite evident, and we have a distinguished panel here with us today. And if you may allow me, I will start with our dear friend Miret Mabrouk. Miret is the Senior Fellow and Funding Director of the Egypt Program at the Middle East Institute. She has been working at several think tanks, Atlantic Council, Middle East Institute, amongst many others. She holds a BA in Mass Communication and MA in Broadcast Journalism from the American University in Egypt. And her region of expertise is Egypt, Libya, and Africa. Miret, I mean, you've been doing a lot of work in this respect, you know. In view of the unpredictability, more so there is more even unpredictability when it comes to United States policies. A Trump administration could signal new trends of protectionism, more America first, more fissures in global alliances. What is your take when it comes to solutions? Are there going to be more direction to regional alliances? What would be the role of the United States in a post-Trump era? I mean, you don't have to answer my question specifically, but I think you have more insights that you can share with us today. We have 10 minutes for each panelist, and then we will have to reserve a few minutes at the end for questions and answers. And allow me, of course, His Excellency Minister Amr Moussa, we will extend the 10 minutes a little bit further upon his request. So Mirat, please.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is a tricky panel to be discussing geopolitics on. The level of experience on this panel is truly frightening, so I'm going to be very, very careful. You jumped straight into a Trump presidency. Now, I should just point out that it is about 50-50 at the moment. Nobody knows. But in answer to your question, nobody knows what a Trump presidency will be like because there have been no policies put out. Now, oddly enough, we have probably a better understanding of it on the economic side, protectionism, tariffs, we understand that. On the foreign policy side, we really don't know. Now, there is one area where we sort of know, and that is the current conflict in Gaza. And that sort of leads into the larger aspect of this discussion. When we talk about geopolitics, we want to bear in mind that the tectonic plates have shifted. The world is not what it was. But I'm not sure that the West understands that those plates have shifted or how fast they are shifting. And we first saw that, I think, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, or more accurately, the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, where the West asked most non-aligned countries to leap up and sanction Russia. And nobody did. Because at the end of the day, we are shifting from bilaterals or multilaterals into minilaterals. It is a matter of cross purposes. It is a matter of alliances. It is a matter of mutual interests. And I do think that the rest of the world will no longer be pushed into responding into a particular way. But when we say those plates have shifted, people still tend to look to the US, the EU, and China. And I think it's very, very important to realize that all politics is local. In my opinion, the US has rapidly squandered its place in the world, its power, its soft power, its position on Gaza, I think, has put it in a corner that it doesn't realize and it doesn't know how to get out of. And I do think that things are going to get exponentially worse until the elections, because nothing's going to happen until the elections. There is going to be a steady creep towards the state of Israel attempting to get as much as it needs up until the elections with no interruption. Now, the problem with that is, you mentioned Israel and Iran. There is a strong possibility that the Israelis will push up through Syria, over Iraq and down into Iran and attack Iranian energy fields. And if that is the case, energy prices go up, which will pretty much seal a Trump presidency, which of course is something Mr. Netanyahu wants. But more than that, the US had an opportunity to demonstrate world leadership and regional prowess, and I think it squandered it. Much the same for the EU. China is an entirely different matter. I think that people who look to China as some sort of counterweight for the West are mistaken. China has its own very, very specific set of interests, and they don't usually align with anyone else's. China, I think, is at best a casual partner, one that you can look to for investment, but I would hate to have to rely on it for anything. You also mentioned economics and conflicts. Now, here's the thing. When people talk about conflicts, I think it's kind of a sad case that some conflicts appear to be more worthy of attention than others. I mean, we know, for example, that on October 7th, 1,200 Israelis were killed. And in response, we've had 42,000 dead Palestinians. And now the people of Lebanon are stuck between Israel and Hezbollah. It's horrific. However, I don't know that many people who can tell me the number of people who have been killed in the DRC over the last 25 years. That number is 6 million. 6 million, and nobody talks about them. It's astonishing, which means that, unfortunately, news being what it is, it depends on who's got the news cycle, and it certainly isn't the DRC or anyone else. All right. But what that means is there is a lack of attention paid to parts of the world that I think have had enough of the status quo and are just beginning to realize it. Specifically, I refer to Africa and I refer to India, not China, Africa and India. You will have all heard of the I2U2, which is a purely political US invention. That's India, the UAE, the US, and Israel. But it is based on IMEC, which is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor that goes through India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Greece. With the current circumstances, I think Israel is going to be slightly nudged out of it, but the rest remains solid. When I refer to the tectonic plate shifting, we may want to consider that we are no longer really the Middle East. We are part of the Middle East. We're also part of West Asia, if you like. We are going to be closer to India than we are going to be to the West, and it's to our advantage. I think the government of Egypt already realizes that and is moving towards that. But I think that Egypt needs to take advantage of that. You asked another question right at the end about US politics, which I haven't answered. I've forgotten.
The implications of US politics, I mean, there is a vacuum.
Yes.
And this vacuum has implications.
Yes.
And who's going to take the lead? Usually, you had superpowers more or less taking the lead, either economically or politically.
Yes.
Intervening in regional conflicts.
Yes.
Now it's very obvious that there is a vacuum.
There is,
and subsequently, we are looking for solutions. What are the solutions? Who is going to take the lead and with who? I mean, something pertinent, for example, let me just give you an example, The EU, for example, they're in the midst of it. EU, for the last couple of years, are starting to look outwards of the EU for their own purposes.
Yes.
Illegal migration, integration, near-shoring, friendly shoring.
Yes.
So there is a kind of a momentum in this direction. So there are solutions that might be led by other than the usual suspects. How does this implicate countries like Egypt or in Africa at large? That's the question.
So I honestly realize that people want a nice, easy answer to that. There isn't one. I do think that what Egypt and what every other country like Egypt needs to do is start looking at minilateral relations rather than anything else. If you are looking towards the United States to not fill that vacuum because it's removed it, if you are looking towards the United States to step up and do something, I don't think that that's going to happen. The EU is in not a much better place. I think that that gap is going to be filled more by regional actors. I think that you will see the Gulf playing a larger role. I think that you will see India playing a larger role. I think you will see China playing a larger role. It's not like the West is going to go away, but it simply does not have the pull that it used to. It doesn't have the offense. It can't make anyone do anything. But more importantly, it cannot offer the kind of aid or support that it used to as well. So you're going to have to fend for yourself.
In a nutshell, your conclusion is that we're going to be witnessing a very fluid situation, or a very fluid area with with uncertainties, and lack of direction.
Absolutely.
So, this is a very, very optimistic approach.
Sorry that it is, but the thing is, problems lead to opportunities. If we look at a problem simply as a problem, then it is. But it is an opportunity, and it is an opportunity for countries like Egypt to step up and take more of an account for themselves.
Well, thank you, Miret. But let me move to Dr. David Monnier. Pleasure to have you with us here. Dr. David is Professor David Director of the Center for Africa-China Studies, Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations, University of Johannesburg. I'm not going to go through your CV. It's very long, you know. But anyway, let me ask you, I mean, China, it's been mentioned. BRICS is another attempt, how successful that would be. You know, Mirat is just saying China is more or less self-centered, have their own agenda. What's your view on that? But I also want to mention something else, you know, I mean, again, the disruption of technology and its implications on the world economy, having the United States in a leading role, but China is in a catch-up role. What would that imply on new opportunities or even more threats? And what would be a BRICS attempt, you know, noting the fact that more countries are trying to join in, despite the fact that their contribution to world GDP is still minimal, their currencies almost not existent in the world currencies reserves. So it would be very interesting, you being an expert on that topic, to share with us your insights.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers and my great friend. Pleasure to be in your city. It was great seeing in Johannesburg. What should be my starting point? I always wish if I was a time traveler, and if I was one, I would say the best period to fully understand what's happening now is to go back to 1929, 1933. I think that period for me, it's much more closer to what's happening currently in the world we live in. Massive poverty, a lot of crises in terms of economies not doing well. The core economies and those in the periphery. The rise of fascism within countries and globally. The disintegration of what we consider as an anchor body like United Nations, then it was the League of Nations, to its death, countries not agreeing on anything in trade and wars. I think if you spoke about BRICS, G20, we had the Summit of the Future just now. I really do not think that the post-1945 world order led by the United States and mainly Western countries can hold anymore. They are, as my colleague has rightly put it, the United States remains a very powerful country, but that hegemony on global politics is waning, is going down, and is going down quite fast. And one of the reasons is the rise of others. I think we are seeing not just China. I think there's so much on China, but there are a lot of other players all over the world, in all regions, including Egypt itself, as a power in its own right. And in G20, we are in BRICS, the global south itself. I think it's raising issues that need to be attended to. What are the core issues and trends that we need to pay more attention to? Is that there's a rise of massive number of people, and the bulk of those people, particularly the young, tend not to agree with the old, and countries in themselves are no longer agreeing with the world order in which they have no stake in it. So there's a need of reforms that we're talking about on one hand. And then conflicts, instability, starting within the US itself, chaos, not agreeing on anything. We look at the Congress, it says chaos is in any other country in Africa. And the media, no one listens to, I mean, when I was young, BBC, just to hear the sound of BBC was something. Now it's the last channel that I listen to. And at times in passing, I can't take more than 5 minutes listening to some channels, which used to be the channels. So social media and others, reliable channels. So the world is changing in that sense. So the rise of China and tension with the United States, is it Cold War? Not really. It's not Soviet Union. China is not Soviet Union. I think it's competition over precisely issues that you have raised, technology, markets, dominance. We're talking of your Apple versus Huawei. We're talking of EVs. I don't know the streets of Cairo and the streets of Johannesburg. The kind of cars are changing. You see more Chinese cars. And with each month, the numbers are increasing. So the world we live in that sense of knowing that knowledge, technology, ideas, leadership, democracy, human rights, tended to come from the US and Western world. And if you look what's happening and issues well presented by my colleague in your neighborhood, the Palestinian and now Lebanon issue, is that at times the very same people who are in the forefront and promoters and champions of democracy, human rights, and are the supporters of genocide, what appears to be genocide. And the world doesn't know who to listen to, who is a Democrat and who is a fascist. You really don't know. And that's the crisis that we face. But I think the bigger question is that then what then do we do? The world, the global south in particular, is on the rise. I tend to slightly differ. Yes, BRICS is important, and Egypt is welcome to BRICS. It's an important body. It's not going to change the world overnight, but I think the impact it is having is massive. I think it's going to have a huge impact on core issues, which are the pillars of post-1945 world order. What are those? Namely, currency, the US dollar. There's not, we are going to Kazan for the BRICS summit. I do not think Kazan will produce a BRICS current. But if you ask me if BRICS is not producing a BRICS current, are we having a de-dollarization? The answer is simply yes. As a matter of fact, the de-dollarization is now accelerating. And it's accelerating in the sense that countries are now increasingly trading in their local currency than the dollar. So there is fast movement to local currency exchange among Saudi Arabia accepting yuan and other currencies, and a number of countries, including Africans, that are in that trend. So that knocks a major pillar of a post-45 world. The SWIFT, there is a new BRICS SWIFT coming. So those global public goods are changing, and slowly, it won't be over time. So that will have impact on the US, it will have impact on Europe, it will have impact on those countries we had an advantage in the past, and it will advantage some countries in the global south and we will continue to have situation and bring more tension over nuclear. We never talk about nuclear. Nuclear war is possible. Before I came here, a friend of mine stated something that 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, if you look back, you might say that the Third World War has started. And we'll look back and what has been happening since last year to now. I don't subscribe to that view, and I'm scared even to think about it. But from what I see in the South China Seas, what I see in this part with what's happening in Palestine and what's happening in Congo, the DRC, and a number of parts. Europe used to be a stable zone of peace. Now it's an instability. Kosovo, we talk about Ukraine, but we're forgetting that there are a number of other areas in Europe, and therefore our calls upon for the world, for us, for Egypt, to have a foresight in terms of leadership. And when we say leadership, we just don't mean the head of state and politicians. All of us, civil society, communities, thinkers, to really prioritize key issues. Peace. No country that will go to war can attain development. And no country that does not develop its infrastructure, does not prioritize development, will forever see peace. So these are the lessons we learned, and I hope that conversations such as this brings us to think about hardcore trends and think ahead and prioritize peace above all. Thank you.
So again, thank you, Dr. Moini. Again, more uncertainty, more fluidity, more disruption. I don't think, I mean, we've been seeking conclusions or solutions. Obviously, solutions seems to be hovering around many areas. But anyway, I would have to go to His Excellency Ambassador Abu Bakr al-Hifni, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Egypt. It's a pleasure to have you with us here today. We have challenges here in Egypt. Geopolitics have been more or less dictating our fate, our economic fate. In ways has been very disruptive. In other ways, it's creating opportunities. If I may say, aging populations in Europe, the threat of illegal migration, again, puts Egypt in center stage to capitalize on these opportunities. Talking about nearshoring, we're talking about presumably a responsible role in the area in view of the Gaza war. That more or less seems to highlight a role of Egypt that was not on the books even a year ago. So my question to you, Your Excellency, how do you see a country like Egypt capitalizing on the situation? From an economic perspective, definitely tied to its political stature in the region, or its re-rising political stature in the region.
Well, I will thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizer for inviting the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Firstly, I would like to say I'm a member of the government, and I used to be a diplomat before, so I will try to be as transparent as a member of government can be. Allow me this subtlety in what I'm going to say. Firstly, yes, I think that the role of Egypt has grown up in the last days, in the last years, especially in the last 5 years. Regrettably, this is related to the issues and the crisis that has been surrounded us. For Sudan, for example, we have been excluded from the Sudanese issue for 5 years at least. All the the African Union was excluding us. The European Union was excluding us. We were not part of any attempt to resolve the issue in Sudan. Now everybody is coming to us. I just came from a meeting with the German envoy just before I come, and I regret my delay. I have a 10 minutes delay due of the coming from the new capital. And this is exactly what I told them, that now you are coming to us because you have left us behind for many years. Because Egypt is the only country in this region who doesn't have a hidden agenda in Sudan except one thing, the stability and the unity of Sudan. This goes for Libya as well. We don't have any hidden agenda in Libya. We want the stability of Libya. We want the stability of the Red Sea, of Somalia. We have been accused always of wanting to go to Somalia to annoy Ethiopia. We have never mentioned Ethiopia in any vocabulary, in any rhetoric related to what's going on in Somalia related to Ethiopia. Actually, in Ethiopia, I have to acknowledge that Ethiopia became an annoying country in Africa. A man who came to power with a Nobel Prize and zero problem with all his neighbors. Now he has a civil war in his own country against his own people, the Oromo, against the Amhara, against the problem with the Somalis, problem with the Eritreans, problem with the Sudanese. So our presence in Somalia is related purely to the stability of Somalia, fighting terrorism. We are witnessing a lot of changes in the strategies of the region. We have witnessing on the operation drones coming into the operation at the Red Sea. The Red Sea is, well, Egypt, of course, is supporting all the operations that is seeking security of the Red Sea because it's of great importance, as everybody knows. That is the Detroit of Bab el-Mandab is the entrance of the Suez Canal, and Suez Canal is one of our main revenue and income is coming from the Suez Canal. So today we have around 12 military bases in Djibouti. We are witnessing a lot of militarization of the Red Sea. We are witnessing drones. We are witnessing Shabab in Somalia, witnessing Al-Houthi in Yemen. So yes, regrettably, the role of Egypt had grown because of the crisis in the region, but really we want to go beyond this. Egypt believes that we are going through a world of a multipolar world, where the balance of power is going to the Indo-Pacific area. Now the Indo-Pacific region now became the GDP of the 60% of the international GDP is coming from the Indo-Pacific area. Growth is growing more in the Indo-Pacific area. The BRICS, it is true that the BRICS, regrettably, out of the four structure of the BRICS, we have this cultural thing in Moscow. You have the businessman forum in South Africa, and then you have a third forum. There is no secretariat of any of these instances. Only one instance has a secretariat and has a structure, which is the NDB. And here the NDB is a very, very important institution because it's the only bank where there is no Bretton Woods influence on it. So NDB for us is an opportunity, but it's not for tomorrow. But I believe that maybe in 10, 15, 20 years, the NDB will be of great importance. We are very, very pleased to see that the NDB during the Bretton Woods meeting in Washington in 23 was the one leading the MDBs in terms of trying to find new financial structure and architecture, financial structure and architecture for the MDBs. So the fact that we find Mrs. Rousseff leading this MDBs, this is something very assuring for us because she's, as we know, I mean, who is she, Madame Rousseff? So Egypt is trying to capitalize on all these changes in the world. We are still have very, very close relation with Europe, of course, but we are also working a lot these days on our African relation. Africa is coming again in the loop for Egypt. lately, the Prime Minister have announced that we are going to install a new investment guarantee agency that has been totally the Egyptian central bank have bailed out the old company, and now it became a sovereign fund, and this is going to be addressing African guarantees for our Egyptian businessmen. This is something of very great importance. We are also in the inception of creating a new fund for financing the Nile Basin countries specifically. We are also have a great importance to the Sahel region. And I have to say that the approach of the West, when they are dealing with the Sahel, I mean, with Burkina, with Gabon, with Chad, we need to find the balance between development and sanctions. We cannot just impose sanctions and asking for positive results. I mean, sanctions must be more intelligent, much more addressing maybe governments, but we have really to differ between government and the people. How can we combat terrorism and imposing sanctions at the same time on the people? I mean, sometimes the West, they have a Western approach of our African problems. This is something also has to change, and Egypt here is capitalizing on its credit and heritage and legacy in Africa to make these things work. So, well, this is, I'm trying just to not excess the time and trying to give some responses of how Egypt is trying to capitalize on the current situation.
Despite the fact that our debt holders are Western countries, our trading partners are either Western or affiliated Western country, the Gulf, Europe, North America. So again, on the interim basis, what you're actually trying to say is we're trying to deal opportunistically with what's happening, but strategically speaking, which way would we be leaning for the sake of our economy?
Well, for the sake of our economy, the European Commission has lately came to Egypt with a big package. Of course, nothing is for free. So there is this 7 billion package, 7 billion euros package that has been offered to Egypt, of course, on different tranches and with a lot of conditionalities and blah, blah, blah. Our relation with the United States will remain as a strategic partner for Egypt. Our relation with Russia will remain. We have differences with everybody, and we have a lot of point of agreement of everybody too. So the type of strategic friends or strategic enemies doesn't exist anymore. We with the Russians, for example, we agree on a lot of things. We don't agree with Ukraine, and we have been made this clear. For example, at the General Assembly. I mean, we voted that this is an aggression, for example, but we don't not happy, for example, with the presence of some Russian soldiers in some African countries, for example. They are a source of this problems in these countries sometimes. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Not all the countries have the same thing. For example, with China, we have excellent relations. China became one of our main partners. They are investing. They are the first country in the world to build an industrial park in the Suez Canal Economic Zone, for example. We have today more than maybe 250 Chinese companies working there. The Chinese are following. The South Koreans are coming as well. We have opened a lot of alliances with the Asian our Asian partners. We are very thankful for Japan and Korea to allow us to have budget support in support with the African Development Bank, for example. This is something that also the Korean part of this fund, for example, is coming from the energy fund within the African Development Bank, with whom we have excellent relations. We are working with the NDB, of course. Our Minister of International Cooperation is our governor at the NDB, and as I used to work with her before. We are working on a lot. The de-dollarization is not for tomorrow as well. I mean, the dollarization is coming maybe in 20, 30 years, because the biggest holder of dollars in the world is China. So nobody wants to shoot himself in his feet. I mean, 60% of the international reserves are in dollars. So nobody will, I mean, the dollar will remain the king of currencies for some time. I mean, the second currency will be the euros, and it's only 20% of the international reserve. So we are far away from de-dollarization for the time being. But we have other solutions. For example, we have debt swaps. Debt swaps should be used more by the superpowers, the big creditors in the world, in order to alleviate the debts of the developing countries, and especially for the green transformation in the world, for example. China has signed with Egypt the first debt swap with any other country in the world. China is one of the main creditors in the world, and Egypt is the first country to sign a debt swap for development MOU with China, for example. We have done this before with Germany, with Italy. So we are doing our best in Egypt in order to cope with all these changes.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency. But again, you know, we keep hearing debt, and opportunities to get in debt. As a matter of fact, you know, it's about time that Egypt should start looking on a much more sustainable economy. If we ever, in my opinion, ever assume that we would have a pronounced role, like the opportunity dictates on us today, a solid economy is definitely one big asset, you know, to move forward. But now, you know, we go to His Excellency Mr. Amr Moussa. يعني عمرو بيه في غنى عن التعريف, بس I'm obliged to give a brief. You know, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and former Secretary General of the Arab League, and currently the Chairman of the High-Level Advisory Council of the High Representative of the United Nations Alliance of Civilization, and so many other issues. Your Excellency, I mean, of course, you're going to say whatever you want to say, but I'm just going to pick up on issues, you know. The disruption that we're witnessing right now, that is impacting us. Houthis, Suez Canal, Ukraine, oil prices. Now Gaza and what's happening, you know, I don't think it's going to be a cowboy and Indians as such, the repercussions of which will prevail. And it's going to be sitting on our lap as the border country that has been more or less harboring or championing the cause of Palestinians. Leveraging, you know, we have also disruptive issues. The GERD issue, the dam in Ethiopia, and the threat to our national security. The disruption in the Horn of Africa and its implications on our economy and on Africa at large. Uncertainty or unpredictability, like we mentioned earlier. It would be great from Your Excellency to share with us your insights and the way forward for a country like Egypt, the way forward for the region. And one other question, you know, the Gulf money has been more of a factor in the region, not only regionally, but globally. In one way, constructive, in other ways, very disruptive. We've seen what's happening in Libya, in Sudan, that have direct implications on national security. Let alone, I mean, when the crisis of Gaza erupted, there doesn't seem to be the power of money of the Gulf did not have the same impact or presence like the role Egypt is playing. These are just issues, you know, I'm trying to mention. It would be great to get your insights and more. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tariq, for calling on me to say a few words at this very serious juncture in international relations. But before delving into the issue, I wish to thank the Egyptian Center for Economic Studies for convening this meeting and to congratulate them on launching the Cairo Forum and on annual basis, which the economic situation in the country, in the region, and in fact internationally would call for such centers to be active and open the door for experts and even others, the normal citizen, to, if not to speak, then at least to hear and understand the dimensions of difficulties, economic difficulties we are facing. And here I want to say that I'm really pleased as a citizen of this country to see the civil society in Egypt collecting its energy, convening conferences, round tables, several discussions on several issues that have to do with the present and the future of Egypt, and also the situation in the region and the international situation. In the last 3 or 4 days, several meetings were convened to discuss different issues, from the economic situation to the international situation to the hydrogen as a source of power, of energy. And I was amazed that on this highly specialized conference about hydrogen, the hall was full, and so many others stayed outside. People want to know, want to understand. That is something I wanted to express my pleasure about because of this activities of our civil society. Since I'm thanking almost everybody, I want to seize the opportunity to commend and thank the Republic of South Africa for the position they have taken and the policy they have initiated to bring Israel to court and to put the issue of genocide before the International Court of Justice. And I really believe that it is not only the issue of Israel and genocide that has been put before the International Court of Justice, but this issue, this initiative by South Africa is contributing in saving the international system. The Security Council has failed. The General Assembly couldn't make it. The rest of the bodies pertaining to what is called the international security system are not working. And a sense of pessimism is rampant all over the world about multilateralism, about the UN system. For the International Court of Justice to emerge as a principal body within the UN system, considering a very serious issue that has to do with violations of human rights, of threatening the security, the regional security, this is something that will be remembered for South Africa in contributing in saving the system. Then now I wish to get to the issue at hand. That's why I'm here. And about the geopolitical conflicts and the complex global challenges. Several conflicts have been mentioned here, but not all of them, although there are very serious conflicts taking place in Africa, in the Sahel region, in the Horn of Africa, in certain individual countries. Sudan is an example. Somalia is an example. Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo is another example. Libya, and so on. In fact, the list should have been comprehensive and with special reference to the situation in Africa. As my colleague has mentioned, Europe is also a theater for current and potential conflicts. In this, I was joking with some of my colleagues the other day that when we deal with the situation in the Middle East and talk with our European colleagues, what you hear in Paris is not what you hear in London, is not what you hear in Berlin. And what you hear within the European Union, what you hear from the chairman of the council, I mean Madame von der Leyen, is not what we hear from the High Representative Joseph Borrell. Very strange. Several expressions of sorrow, of encouragement, of criticism, etc. But they do not form a position to reckon with. When we talk about the future of this region, and when I talk about region, I mean not only the so-called Middle East, but I mean the Mediterranean also. And with the Mediterranean, Europe is our partner, but it will also bring into the equation so many additional problems. They will not be able to solve, but to add to those problems. In fact, as has been mentioned by colleagues and by you, Brad, the international situation is in a very bad shape. It threatens so many serious consequences. It could be that the first superpower is on its way down. It could be. But it also could be that such a situation would push this major superpower to take many rough and tough decisions that would shake the stability in the world. China is another superpower emerging, moving up. It has its own philosophy about what the status of superpower means and when China would decide to challenge, head-on challenge on the issue, who comes first? And this could happen while many of us here in this room, in this hall, are still living. This situation has led to a clear result that globalization, that we have so many years of stressing how important is globalization, and globalization is the new what can I say, not establishment, but the new association that would produce a new international system. We see the globalization now, just nobody talks about. But it is still there. It is still there. Several years ago, few years ago, in fact, I heard the president of China, President Xi of China, talking in the International World Economic Forum, saying exactly this. If America is not interested in leading the global system or globalization, China is ready to lead it. This is another source of conflict that is coming up. In short, we are living in a very interesting period of time, but a very dangerous period of time. Very dangerous. Few weeks ago, in the United Nations, a conference called the Summit of the Future convened. And it convened on the initiative of the Secretary General after what he has seen of chaos in the four corners of the world and almost the demise of the system. And by the system, I mean the San Francisco system, the UN system, and Bretton Woods system, that is the World Bank, the IMF, and the World Trade Organizations, and the rest. So the discussions, the preparations, which took almost over one year, and the work that has been done in drafting the final document called the Pact for the Future, discussed 2 or 3 major issues, but it used a new language. It doesn't say paragraph 1, paragraph 2. It says action 1, action 2, 56 actions. In them, it is interesting for us here in this meeting to refer to a certain language, stressing the link between economic development and peace and security. If there is no peace and security, there will be no meaningful economic development, and vice versa. 1. 2, it stressed the danger inherent in the failure of the Security Council in its job, and that it will stay with us for so many years. We see no solution in the horizon for the crisis of the international security system. It also referred to what is called the double standard. And the double standard, for those who don't know, is the real, what can I say, the main reason for the failure of the UN security system and the paralysis of the Security Council. This is, if we want to talk about the effects of conflicts here and there, it has to be added. Not only the conflict in certain area or in certain continent, but the way the big powers behave and the way they move from being the champion of human rights, respect of international law, into the violators of international law, or the protectors of those who violate international law. We have seen that in Gaza. We have seen that on TV every day. And we have seen the Council, Security Council, unable to adopt a resolution to ceasefire. While buildings are being destroyed before our eyes, while population, civil population, while people, women, children, even animals being killed, slaughtered in front of our eyes. So how can we have confidence in such a leadership? That is why the general consensus is that this situation with leaders and other big entities, etc., the time has come for them to leave the scene as according to their capacities of today. Here in the Middle East, it's so-called Middle East, first, I do not approve of using the term situation in Gaza. It is the situation in the occupied Palestine. Because what we have seen in Gaza, you can see in the West Bank. It happened in the West Bank before happening in Gaza. Destruction of villages, of towns, eviction of population, using severe policies and practices against the population. So, what is the idea? After the events of 7 of October, it became clear that there is a plan. And the plan is to give Israel the sovereignty over the totality of the Palestinian territories. To remove the Palestinian question from the table of attention. To fudge the issue of military occupation, because it is a case of military occupation. In the West Bank, Gaza, in the Golan, in Lebanon. A clear case. It seems to us before that there are limits of supporting Israel, and limits for ignoring the Palestinian rights. We discovered that there are no limits. International law should not be applied on Israel. Double standard. Could this be acceptable? And why is the exception? Especially in light of what the Prime Minister of Israel has stressed from the roster of the United Nations. And I believe he said so in the Congress before that. And he said it recently when he came back. There will be no Palestinian state. That's one. And that Israel will lead a new regional system, new regional order in the Middle East. Would this be opposed by all those who are responsible for the stability of the regional system, the stability of the world, or also encouraged? When one important leader, Western leader, say that I see that he sees that Israel has a very narrow space to live in. That's what he said. They should have more terrorism. Would this be the case? And if this is the case, all of us should be worried about the future of the region. we will be facing tough times, tougher than what we have seen before. This would affect the business, would affect economic development, and as has been said by the pact of the Summit for the Future, Pact for the Future, a successful economy, successful economic development depends on whether peace and security prevail in that region. In all honesty, I am pessimistic. Many like me are pessimistic on the regional issue. Are there solutions? Of course there are solutions. First one is to answer the question. Is Mr. Netanyahu there as the eternal leader of Israel who will determine what the government of Israel would do or not to do for the remainder of the future of the world? Or he would change? That's one. Two, is the Arab world going to be as divided as it has been for so many decades? Would it be possible that the Arabs will sit together and produce a certain position to say no when no is necessary to be said, and to say yes when they see that it is possible to go along with whatever proposition they receive? So I believe that Mr. Netanyahu is not the eternal one. Perhaps some other generation would come and understand and appreciate that the security of Israel lies in peace with its neighbor, not in bombarding them, destroying their homes, and killing their population. And I am here, have some optimism about the future of Arab relations. What we have seen yesterday, or the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia visiting Egypt, talking to the President Sisi, about the situation in the region and the future propositions, I feel that, yes, this is the way that both Egypt and Saudi Arabia would assume the leadership of this region insofar as this issue of war and peace, stability, solution of the Palestinian problem are concerned. Is there a solution for the Palestinian problem? Yes, indeed, there is. Provided that it is not Mr. Netanyahu who is the negotiator for Israel, and not a weak leader on the Palestinian side is leading the Palestinian delegation. For us to bring them together needs assurances, formal assurances, written assurances, because after all so many years, I don't believe what is being said just to please the people sitting in the room. There must be a plan sanctioned by the Security Council and the United Nations, regardless of their inability to act, but they have the ability to receive and to consider and to say what should be said. Effective or not effective, that is not the issue now on the point I'm talking about. For us here in Egypt, the prospects of progress, getting out of the economic crisis, charting a road, sure road to the future, requires an active role in making peace in this region. Of course, I'm not talking about what should be done internally on the economic situation in the private sector and how to deal with the economic crisis. But I see that there are some prospects here and there, chances, opportunities, if we have a plan. And I believe that we have a plan on how to rebuild the economy in Egypt, how to rebuild the soft power of Egypt, that is economic, cultural, etc., in order to bring stability to this region. On Africa, we have this dual identity. On Africa, unfortunately, we face a major problem, threat to our lives, which is our existence even, which is the issue of the dam in Ethiopia. I want here to use the language, which is a positive one. There is no problem that defies all solutions. We can't solve the problem. When I talk to some friends from Ethiopia, they talk exactly like me. We must solve it. We cannot continue on confrontation footing all the time. And a dam that has been built to add to the economy, to the well-being of the people, should not be the dam to cause exactly the opposite to a neighbor of us. We have old relations with Ethiopia, historical relations with Ethiopia, and with the whole Horn of Africa. And the elements to rebuild such relations on solid, fair grounds are there. There is no place for us to just feel that the issue is impossible. The issue is not impossible at all. And the water of the Nile will continue to flow to Egypt and will not affect the Nile itself and the riparians. And here, I am not that pessimistic. I am not that pessimistic. Finally, have I exceeded the 10 plus?
30 minutes.
And 30 minutes. So should I say thank you and stop?
30 minutes with pleasure.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
if
you
we
very
can
much.
have 15 minutes for a question and answer.
I believe that was enough, what I have said, what I wanted to tell you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for an insightful, I would say, lecture. But before I mean, it's a bit unfortunate, you know, that this panel was supposed to come up with solutions. I mean, or economic solutions.
That is your responsibility because
I failed in my responsibility. It is just more questions than answers, more uncertainties. But before we start the question and answer session, I want to have some food for thought. The Nobel Prize for Economics went to Acemoglu and Robinson. You know, the book of Why Nations Fail. It's about the impact of liberal democracy in flourishing economies, and the impact of no accountability to economies that were in demise. And they have a good argument when it comes to that, yet it's being contested today. We have the case of China, for example, that is not pursuing this model, yet they have a very flourishing economy. And not only that, they probably claim that challenging actually liberal economies. So that's a question. But then again, there are shifting dynamics, on shifting powers. We cannot assume that China is going to be there forever. With an aging population, probably their role in the world economy would diminish. Presumably, obviously, the workforce of India can be a deciding factor in another role in world economy. They're projecting themselves as the labor force of the world. Aging populations in Europe with a migration policy that is not corresponding to the challenges raises a lot of eyebrows and questions, So, I don't think we can assume anything for granted that a power will flourish and another power will demise. But I think there is one factor that can be dictating is the technology acceleration that is accelerating on a pace that, human civilization have never witnessed before. And the question again, what is this role of technology going to impact economies, developing economies, and what would be the role in the power struggle or the power shifts? I don't mean to intrude on the discussion, but I thought I would share these insights before we start a question and answer session. The floor is open. Please, if anybody has any question, I would appreciate to be brief, present himself or herself, and we'll try to, we still have about 14 minutes that we can capitalize on. Yes, please. I will go in order.
Thank you so much for a very, very rich discussion. It's not quite a question as much as a remark or a comment, so that anybody can talk about it. I think what we're talking about the power of economics, deciding politics is a story everywhere. Mirat and Your Excellency, Dr. Amr Moussa, you spoke about those who have the money, those who have the power, those who dictate the whole thing. And the whole world, for example, we all know about 9/11, 2001. Nobody knows about 9/11, 1973, which killed millions of people and so on. My questions, comment or remark, we have been going into this since history. Those having the money, imperialism, colonization, whatever they do with it. But the cycle, it's like a line, it's a circle. They have to come to an end. But what is happening now? The forces, and this is my question, trying to maintain their power, trying to define, to defy this circle by being on power as much as they can. When other powers try to sort of compete, they do their best to eliminate them. So, do you see like another vision of other powers coming to do the whole circle again? Will technology, because even those who have the technology, those who have the money coming from these countries, how, do you see that? And Your Excellency, I think it's a pessimistic situation in this area, and our students see that. But I don't think, let's be realistic, hope of Arabs coming together again. Again, all worlds are working on dividing them as possible. And films like Syriana and stuff like that have said that. So what is your image and comment? Thank you so much.
So allow me to take some questions and then we can comment. Allow me, there is this lady, please. And then we will go to... All right there, please. In other words, your question, is that using brute force to reshape, the economies and the politics of the world, and it's more like a cowboys and Indians, is this the way forward, or do we assume that, with the morality of the world, things would have a more balancing act? But I would say that this would be a question.
Okay. Hi, I'm Raghda. And thank you, Engineer Tariq, and the whole panel for your comments and remarks. My question will be to Dr. Ambassador Amro Moussa. Of course, I'm a big fan, and I've been like following you since all the diplomatic career you had, your opinions, your views, and your wisdom. So I acknowledge the pessimistic tone, and we agree on it. And as a generation, we have witnessed too much, honestly, with all the things happening around us. And sometimes we look for any hope. We look for anything that. So when we talk about what's happening now and the recent developments, you see like Iran is responding, and Houthis and the Hezbollah is responding as well. You see points of resistance here and there, which may happen before. I'm not sure in the early 2000s or the 90s, perhaps they happened or not. But there is a difference at that time, which, as Dr. David said, the social media. When things like that happen, we see the effect on the Israeli interior, the country, the entity itself, how the Israelis are getting terrified, how they are fleeing the country. So sometimes, as Egyptian, I feel like this resistance is the.
You have a specific question.
Sure. My question is, do you see what's happening, the reactions, the resistance, as a hope that things are not going to be as pessimistic as there is a hope? I mean, it won't be a chaos because of the resistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lamis, please.
Thank you very much for the panel. It's very interesting and educating. I have a very short question. Since my dear friend Miret is also coming fresh from the US, and since we have a new resident at the White House in a few days, I would like to listen to different points of views. Is there a difference between Kamala or Trump regarding the Middle East and regarding the whole international system? We've heard Dr. Jeffrey Sachs a few days ago saying that the international financial system is not performing, and the panel is saying that also the political system, especially Mr. Amro Moussa, is saying that political system is not performing. So is there a difference between one and the other, or are we having the same result, whether for the financial system or the international political system? And I would like to listen to Dr. David as well, if Mr. Amro Moussa, Dr. David, and Mirat, if possible.
Please, we'll take the order.
السلام عليكم. أريد التحدث باللغة العربية. أيمن عامر، نائب مدير تحرير بأخبار اليوم. سؤالي للأمين العام أسبق لجامعة الدول العربية. حضرتك يعني الآن هناك تنازع على التعددية القطبية من جديد. روسيا تصارع أمريكا في أوكرانيا عسكريا، والصين تصارع أمريكا اقتصاديا دوليا. حضرتك أبان عهدك في رئاسة الأمانة العامة لجامعة الدول العربية دعوت إلى تكتل الجوار الذي يضم الدول العربية ودولتي تركيا وإيران. هل هذا التكتل من المفترض أن يطبق الآن لإعادة الشرق الأوسط الجديد وإعادة القطبية الدولية؟ السؤال الثاني والأخير، كيف ترى الدور العربي والدور الأفريقي، خاصة أن جنوب أفريقيا قامت بدور عظيم في المحكمة الجنائية الدولية، والدور الشرق الأوسطي للتصدي للعدوان الإسرائيلي الذي دام عاما كاملا، والانحياز السافر الأمريكي عسكريا ولوجستيا وسياسيا، والفيتو الأمريكي يعني منحاز لإسرائيل ضد حقوق الشعب.
وضحت النقطة. شكرا، ميرسي قوي قوي.
Thank you. Well, very small question. I think we are not playing the role that we can play regarding Africa. We are not cooperating with the African countries well to perform somehow kind of political power so we can negotiate with them. I've been in African countries during the last year, and unfortunately, they don't see the conflict that is happening in the Middle East, and they don't understand what is going on. And we are not doing our role to to tell them exactly what is happening and to gain their support and to perform political power with them. Africa is not that weak. We can do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Yani, if we allow me, maybe we can pick up some comments. Your Excellency, Minister Musa, we can start with you and then
thank you.
Dr. David.
I believe the last question should be addressed to the Deputy Foreign Minister. So he will answer this question, I'm sure. Yes, indeed, there are 3 points that have to be stressed. The BRICS and its real effects, the Iran issue, and the high tech, the artificial intelligence and its effects. Of course, so many problems, new problems, will emerge as a result of the artificial intelligence and the prospects it opens and the threats it represents. Some of them would be considered as threats to international peace and security, as the climate change has been considered a threat to international peace and security, as pandemics also was proposed as an item under this title, threats to international peace and security. So this issue, in fact, I put before the organizers of the center here that it has to have a place on the agenda as a threat, of course, a prospect, but a threat too. What kind? Recently, I read an article about the artificial intelligence and how it is not only going to تخليق مش خلق تخليق, to create, to make, manufacture a human being, not a human, a parallel to the human being, but not only to be a source of information, but a source of thinking, arguing, and answering questions about history and so on. One of the new things that have been mentioned is that they can manufacture this creation as Mr. Beethoven or Bertrand Russell or whoever, or even Karl Marx. And of course, many of you now are thinking of who in Egypt would be recreated in order to ask him, what have you done? So instead of reading books about this person, you can ask that creation, what do you think of this? What do you mean by that? And he can answer, and he would be, or she, by the way, able to tell you, yes, I am sorry. At that time, I didn't think of that issue, but I would answer you according to the considerations of the day. Just, you see how things are developing. Then the issue of BRICS. BRICS is an organization that is new to the system, and I believe it is one of the positive new grouping. But just look into the formation. This is China and India, and they would disagree on almost everything. China, Russia, in total disagreement with America. Brazil, South Africa, and the rest of those who joined. They can discuss things, and of course, in an independent way, separate from the imposition coming from the Western hegemony. But short of this, or beyond that, they cannot go anywhere. India is more on the Western side than on the Chinese-Russian side. Another positive thing, in addition to that point that it is a formation of countries that can say no to the hegemonic Western policies. The second point is about the presence of a leader of international stature, that is Lula, President Lula of Brazil, as a member and a capable personality of leading certain political trends that do not necessarily follow under the influence of super or big powers within the Brexit or outside of it. More than that, I believe it has been very ably explained that there are certain things that we can do, but not much. However, it is a positive sign. Now, Iran. Iran is a member of the Middle East. It's not an alien member. It was not created since 75 years. It is there since thousands of years. And we have to live with Iran. Iran has to live with us. And by the way, we in Egypt, we don't have this issue of Shia and Sunnah, etc. We passed this since long time, to the point of that one of our princesses were married to the Shah of Iran. And who administered and managed the marriage was Sheikh al-Azhar between the Shia bridegroom and the bride. So we don't have this. We have more comfortable relations when it comes to the basics of relations between societies and countries. But Iran has gone too far in its regional policy, to the point that one of its leaders declared that Iran has the authority to move things in four Arab capitals: Baghdad, Damascus, Beirut, and Sana'a. That was too much for us to swallow. Iran also does not recognize the Arab Initiative of Beirut 2002, which means that we are ready to make peace with Israel, provided that this peace would be based on certain bases and common elements that have to be there. There can be no peace while the occupation continues, for example. So we said we are ready not only to normalize, but also to recognize Israel. So the question of normalization, according to our initiative, is not a taboo. Normalization is not a taboo. But normalization has conditions. It's not a free of charge one. Has conditions to be built on, which is the withdrawal, the recognition of a Palestinian state, etc. And the issue of Jerusalem, issue of refugees, other things I suggest that you read this initiative again and to understand how the Arab position on this issue would be formulated, and it continues to work. That initiative continues to work. One of the Israeli goals, the goals of the Israeli policies is to cancel this initiative and try to write something else. I think that this is a very bad thing that we shouldn't approve of. We have a reasonable thing that has been recognized by the UN and the Security Council, by the Secretary Generals of the United Nations, and by so many countries. Therefore, Iran should recognize this initiative too. Iran adopts the Palestinian question as its main issue. The Palestinian question, that is good, but it is also, not also, it is a priority for the Arab world. Iran should cooperate with the Arab world, not take the issue in its hands and acts as if the Arab world does not exist. Iran is certainly one of us in the Middle East. And by the way, when I formally proposed to the Arab Summit back in 2010, the establishment, the creation of in Arab neighborhood policies. I mentioned officially, that's the Secretary General of the Arab League, to the Arab Summit, that we have to invite all our neighbors to come and establish a community together, with two exceptions. Iran, that she would join us after we talk about the issue of Palestine and how to talk together and agree on a road for the future, to the future, and to solve the problems like with Iraq or with the Emirates, etc. And Iran would be acceptable and more than welcome. As for Israel, it is there. The only condition for Israel to join us, the neighborhood policy, is to recognize a Palestinian state, a viable Palestinian state. If it does so, there is no other problem. And the strange thing, and for this I can say that in such an intellectual gathering, we have a history of problems with Iran, Persia, the Arabs, etc. We had problems with the Ottoman Empire. For Israel, it's only 75 years old, or 70-something years old, and the problem is Palestine. If it cooperates in solving the Palestinian question, we'll have no other major problems with it. But it seems that they are not in the mood to accept the Palestinian question. Then there will be no mood in the Middle East to have a stable peace, unfortunately.
More pessimism.
No, I said if.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We're going to have to wrap up, but I mean, before we wrap up, I mean, we borrowed another 5 minutes from Dr. Abla, so we can have a wrap up, you know. Your Excellency, Ambassador Hefni, you have any particular comments?
Yeah, I would like to come to the lady's question concerning our relation with Africa. I really beg to disagree with you that we don't have a presence in Africa. Actually, our new Minister of Foreign Affairs, his first trip was on Egypt Air flight to Somalia and Djibouti. That was only a few days after being appointed. The second day he has been appointed, we have been hosting in Egypt the first all-inclusive meeting of the Sudanese opposition and Sudanese factions in Cairo. The only time in 5 years that all the Sudanese have been meeting in one place. Our relation with Africa has different folds. I mean, in the African Union, we have appointed a commissioner for infrastructure and energy. Peace and security, we have been the president of this month of the Peace and Security Council, and we have also commissioned a visit to Port Sudan. We are one of the leaders of the FTA, it's the African Free Trade Agreement. We have hosted this month a very important meeting, a workshop of the COMESA, in order to streamline all the investment laws within the COMESA countries with the assistance of the UNCTAD and the UNDP and the European Union. Egypt is one of the main contributors to the African Development Bank. On the bilateral issues, we have just the Prime Minister have launched the new, as I've said, the new agency for investment guarantees in Africa with a capital of $600 million. We also we're going to launch a new initiative concerning the Nile Basin countries, so maybe $100 million. On the bilateral issues, we are supporting the private sector to go to Africa. Our private sector, like Swedi, Garabli, Orascom, Infinity, Mansour, Mantrak, they're all over Africa. We are very, very much present, not only into construction things, but also into services. We are offering services in in Djibouti, we have in Rwanda, in Burundi, we have a lot of projects that some of them I cannot even mention now because it's confidential information for the private sector. I don't want to annoy them. We are also putting the private sector with the government into projects in a PPP approach. For example, we have just have a meeting for some our properties and assets in Africa where we can find some Egyptian private sector to work with them, like for example, the assets of Nasser companies in Africa. And on the military basis, we have military cooperation with most of the 44 countries at least of Africa. We have hospitals in a lot of countries. We have a dialysis section in Addis Ababa in Black Lion Hospital. We have a hospital of Dr. Magdi Aoub in Rwanda. We have 2 hospitals in the making in DRC. In Gabon, we are building roads, airports, railways. In Djibouti, we are sending medical missions. We have an Egyptian agency for partnership with Africa that is sending experts in all the fields. So this is, I mean, in a nutshell, what we are doing with Africa. Of course, I mean, we are a country. We are not a rich country, and we don't have a lot of capabilities. So we are working a lot these days with the private sector. And you are going to witness in the coming months a lot of projects that are launched with the assistance of the private sector in Africa. Big projects.
Thank you.
Sorry, I want to add something very important. Is the dam of Tanzania. It's one of the excellent examples of cooperation in a PPP because it's Arab contractors with the Swede, and they are building a dam in Tanzania with a cost of $5.5 billion. So
thank you, Your Excellency. I think one of the questions, not for now, is connectivity and logistics, which is the one bottleneck for penetration. But anyway, I mean, Professor Moini, please.
Well, thank you. It is quite refreshing. And Minister, thank you. As I was coming here, I was told not to mention Ethiopia, for instance, or even Sudan. So when you're in Cairo, don't mention those. But hearing from you, it's really, I'm touched by that. I think don't underestimate the power of Egypt. Egypt, Africa, we have rich history. Egyptian civilization, I think, has so much to contribute to the world, and more so in Africa. I think what we need to say with geopolitics always depressing, but to be much more positive, I think we have so much to contribute as a continent. We are 1.3 billion people, and unlike other continents that are aging, Africa's youthful. We have 60% of most fertile Arab land in the world, and the future of agriculture and food. Yes, artificial intelligence is important, but basic food is required. I think you can utilize the knowledge we have in the past and the present to take advantage of what we have. And the continent is quite huge. And I think Egypt's multi-identity should play a critical bridge building with the continent on key and strategic areas. Yes, South Africa played a critical on ICJ, but that should not be the only issue. Egypt can champion something else. We're going to G20, we're going to BRICS. I think one major issue we have is the major global companies, both from West and East, are not paying enough tax. There's so much capital outflow from the continent. I mean, just to give an example, where Egypt or any other country on the continent could champion using the advantage you have, as you rightly put it, you're close to United States. Yes, United States is declining. And if I put my neck on the block, I think President Trump is coming in. So I think it's going to worsen the situation, but the leverage that Egypt has with the United States and direct the giant how to operate on the African continent, that in itself will be critical. As much as Russia and China So I think we're going to see more. And lastly, technology and disruptive nature of it. It is that more resources are required to be invested in education. Technology should not be seen as a domain of the Western world. I think we need to put more and more resources and work together through the AU to ensure that we complement each other across the African continent, but invest more in the youth, invest more in people, in gender issues, women, and ensure that we tap this unused energy we have to live together peacefully. So we have hope. I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Monnier. Thank you very much. Miret, طبعا يعني Abla is looking at me, you know, so if you can please answer Lamis's question in brief, as much as you can, and then we wrap up.
Very, very briefly, in fact, possibly we could chat afterwards, but very briefly, there is very little daylight in between both parties. The biggest difference is that the Democrats have articulated some kind of policy, and there will be some sort of consistency after an election, whereas that is not the case with the Republicans. No policy has been articulated, and the only thing that is clear is that specifically in the case of Palestine, there are, shall we say, business interests. Specifically, Mr. Kushner is interested in building condos, but there's really no daylight in between the two, none. And it's complicated by the fact that we have absolutely no idea what the makeup of a Republican cabinet would be, because there is reluctance to join the cabinet by everyone who is not hard right.
Thank you all. Thank you for a great panel, Your Excellencies. Now we can adjourn. Thank you very much.